Hi, it's Greg Dwyer. Welcome to Mindful Conversations. My guest today is Mark Iwanicki. Today we're talking about philosophy, but not just any philosophy. We're talking about Hermetic philosophy. Mark, thanks for being on the broadcast.
Thanks for having me on again.
So I would think that most people don't know what Hermetics is. Am I saying it right? Hermetics?
Hermetics.
Hermetics.
Yeah.
Hermetic philosophy is all about. What is this?
Well, it's kind of a secret tradition, so to speak, meaning that it's knowledge that generally isn't given out to people in general.
So should we go to a commercial then?
No.
This out?
This was back more so in ancient times, in medieval times, where a lot of people couldn't read, and a lot of people were just expected to be feudal servants on their plantation, so to speak.
Okay, well, I want to play devil's advocate. Don't you think that things haven't really changed that much in the sense?
Yeah, sure, you're absolutely right.
I mean, if you want to hide something, what do you do with it?
Put it out in plain sight.
And put it in a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, plain sight, I like that too. So sometimes the symbols are there, or sometimes the answer is there, but people are so caught up with what bread and circus and other things that they just don't have time to think.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what these arts help you to do. They help you to think, they help you to see clearly, they help you to calibrate your consciousness in a way that is more in tune with the natural order of things.
Interesting. I just wrote an article the other day for people that are entrepreneurs, performers, speakers, and I talked about the seasons. So I talked about the winter, the spring, the summer, and the fall, and I talked about why not calibrate your life to the seasons in the sense that there's a time to ponder, winter, there's a time to hibernate, there's a time to plan, there's a time to think, right? The days tend to be shorter, you know, the nights are longer. You get to a place where you just kind of contemplate about life. You don't want to be, if you're a farmer, you're not going to be sowing the seed during the middle of the winter.
Right.
And then you got the spring, which is you're going to spring out in action. And then the summer, you're going to nourish yourself, or you're going to relax maybe a little bit and just maybe enjoy the progress. And then finally in the fall, October, September, November, to reap the harvest. So how much of this have we gotten away from because we're so modernized with our cell phones and with electricity and heat and everything else that has separated us from nature?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
You think so?
We have gotten away from the natural order of things.
Okay.
I mean, what was it, probably in the medieval time, sometime where the clock was invented and that changed our consciousness. I mean, how often are you always looking at your watch, oh, I'm late, or I got to be there at this time, at this specific time.
Right.
So that changes the way you look at the world. Every span of time becomes a number, and then you see all the numbers that are scrolling across the television screen. Anytime you turn on one of those news channels or one of those financial news channels, all you see is numbers going around. So it changes your consciousness from the left brain. Okay. I'm sorry, from the right brain over into the left brain.
You think it's on purpose to kind of throw people off, or to separate people from nature in general, or what?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a specific thrust to do that by the powers that be, or whoever you might want to think of. But it's definitely happened, whether that's a natural occurrence or not.
Right.
And so we're talking about Hermetic arts and Hermetic learning. I see them as a way to reconnect to those natural rhythms of life and rhythms of consciousness and rhythms of your own psychological experience of the world.
So if someone comes to you, you have a conversation, I know you're doing a lecture in February, and they ask you, hey, how do I align myself with this philosophy? Do they have to go to a library or a bookstore and buy all these books and read about Hermes or Hermetic philosophy? Or what would you tell them is the short answer?
Well, the short answer is paying attention to the seasons, as you said.
Oh, really?
I mean, right now we just came out of the winter solstice, which is the shortest amount of light in a day, and we're now gradually getting more and more light. So this time, as we're going into the underworld, so to speak, as they would say in mythological terms, it's a time to connect to yourself, connect to your traditions, connect to all the things that make you who you are, so that you can bring that out again in the spring and share that that aspect of yourself with the world.
See, this is where I have an issue with this, and it's this concept that winter doesn't start until December 21st. That's the beginning of winter. I would like to think that winter starts earlier, like November 1st. Seems like right after Halloween, October 31st, it gets darker. There's a bigger contrast there, and not only that, but you got the Christmas season, you got the Hanukkah season, you got the New Year's Eve season, and I know people want to celebrate in the middle of winter, but it just seems to me that that whole system or that whole calendar allows people to be out of sync, because truthfully, the 21st or the 22nd, 23rd, the sun is coming back, and we're moving closer and closer to days that are longer. But we've been told that we're in the middle of winter, which is true. I mean, there is some lag time, I think, in the sense that, you know, like today was unbelievably cold. You know, it felt like the very, very first day of winter. But in my mind, I know it's going the other way. You know. So I guess my question is, should we pay attention to the seasons, and can they benefit us for our business life and our personal life?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we came out of nature. We are part of nature. We're walking in nature. So there's a guy, I mean, just common sense would tell you that we have some connection to the way the cycles of the seasons work. And the old traditions of a lot of pagan traditions, they divide the year up not only into the solstices and equinoxes, but at the midpoints of those, if you consider the year as a circle, and then you have the solstices and equinoxes. At those midpoints is are festivals that are celebrated to honor that concept that we are in the beginning of the cold season or the underworld season, and as we make our way through to the winter solstice and then come back out in the spring.
And whether they're 12 or they're 8, I can't remember exactly how many.
Well, there's 12 months.
There's 12 months.
There's 12 months. Those are aligned with the zodiac. And there's, I guess they call it the wheel of the year. And so there's 8.
There's 8 of those. I guess what I'm saying is you don't have to be a pagan or you have to join Wicca to appreciate this philosophy. It's understanding that if you understand what's going on in nature and really incorporate that, it's better than trying to fight it, like staying up all night in the middle of winter or trying to fight the season. Probably is not going to work. You know, I mean, it wouldn't make any sense to plant seed and go out and harvest in the middle of winter. It's crazy.
Yeah, and so because there's lots of alignments with these Hermetic arts, astrology, tarot, numerology, and then from the Hebrew tradition, the Kabbalah, because they have a lot of correspondences to those cycles of the seasons. That's why I see them as a way to help realign your own consciousness with those natural cycles that we're talking about.
Well, doesn't it go back to this idea, you mentioned the Kabbalah, that man is a microcosm of the universe, and so what's above is below, and what's below is also above. And so if you're out of sync with nature, you're out of sync with what's going on in the world, you're probably going to get sick, or you're going to get stressful, or maybe you'll even get depressed. How much of that do you think you believe? Do you really believe that we're a microcosm of the greater picture?
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Do? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what is it, the old, in the Vedic tradition, they have the concept of the jeweled net of Indra.
I don't know anything about it. What's that? Okay,
so it's the concept that everything is connected to each other, and the jeweled net of Indra is this net. It's a net, not only in one dimension, but multiple dimensions. So think of a grid. And at each intersection of that point is a highly polished jewel that reflects everything around it perfectly. And so if you think of a jewel and something right next to it would be, I guess, reflected much more clearly than something farther away. However, it still reflects the entire whole. It's kind of the concept of fractals and the holofractal universe, which is something that's that's been around in metaphysical and mathematical circles recently.
So what is that about? I know a little bit about it, but you kind of lost me. Does that mean What exactly does that mean?
So man is a microcosm of the world.
I see.
And as above, so below. We're a small piece of a larger hologram.
Okay.
So everything that's within me is within you.
Right.
And we're both reflecting something about each other, to each other.
Okay.
Luckily, you and I like each other, so we're reflecting positive aspects. But a lot of times, you'll meet someone and you find something you don't like about them.
Okay. Negative energy, you mean, or a
Negative energy, or you just don't like them.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there's people you met, you just don't like them.
There's nothing in common per se, right? Is that
well, there is something in common.
Oh, there is.
And all that is it's reflecting something within yourself that you've denied.
Oh, yeah. You know, I think it was one of the church fathers, but I remember my mother saying, when you point a finger, you have 3 of them pointing back at you.
There you go, exactly.
And a lot of times when somebody aggravates you, or you don't like someone, or you criticize them, if you really stop and think about it, a lot of it is unresolved issues within yourself.
Correct.
So it's a reflection like a mirror.
Correct.
Interesting.
And that has a lot of ties to Jungian philosophy and Jungian psychology.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
That's a deep rabbit hole, but this seems to be all connected. So how does that tie into Hermetics?
Well, he was a Hermetic scholar as well.
He was.
I mean, not officially, but
Okay.
all of the topics that he just, studied and brought forth into the world had a lot of ties to these topics that we're talking about now, and I'll be talking about in February.
And I think was it Freud that criticized him for being esoteric in this way, and he thought that he went off a deep end, and people would say he was doing the work of the devil, maybe, or he went to the dark side, or
yeah, he was a mystic. His family had a lot of. I believe it was his cousin who was considered a medium, and she could speak to spirits, and because he grew up in that type of environment, he was able and willing to go into these types of strange worlds where a more classically trained scientist like Freud would have kind of denigrated in some way.
Right. Well, even in the Christian tradition, you look at Adam and Eve, right? And they are, in a sense, a micro of God. God tells them that they are to plant, and they are to harvest, and they are to rule over the Garden of Eden. And Adam is to rule over everything, just as God rules over that. And then when you get to the temple in Solomon's day, and also before that, the microcosm was the presence of God in the Ark of the Covenant, and everything that was depicted in the temple was really of the universe. The curtain, the pomegranates, there was so many things in there. I think it was Eusebius that talked a lot about this, but it was like the center of the world, but in the sense that it reflected the world. So I don't know if the Jewish people were influenced by the Persians or by other philosophy, but it seems like a lot of it ties together in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a friend of mine was just talking about the Library of Alexandria.
Which burned down, right? A lot of it?
Which was burned down,
right.
Yeah. I mean, there was one of the great scholars of the old world was Hypatia of Alexandria, a woman, which in those times was pretty odd.
Sure.
So when you're asking whether the Persians were influenced by the Hebrews or whether the Sumerians, like they all kind of hung out together, and they shared their knowledge. They shared these types of thoughts. They shared these types of learnings that they all brought together. And as they were sharing this, they saw that there was a lot of overlap. Say, oh, well, your concept of this is the same thing as our concept of that.
Right.
So when you have a lot of overlap in like these truth-seeking peoples, then you got to start thinking, okay, so there's some kind of connection here. Right.
Well, today is the 8th, right? So 8th of January, we're filming this. So a few days ago was Epiphany in the Christian calendar. And a lot of people think that the wise men coming from the East had some Persian influence. And so they're looking for the stars, they're looking for prophecy. Now, these people are pagans. They're outsiders. They're not necessarily Jewish people. And they're coming and they're looking for a Messiah. And you say to yourself, well, how in the world did they find the answer in the stars? And I know that your background is in searching the stars and studying the stars. How long have you been doing that?
Well, I remember laying down in the snow looking up at the sky as a child. So, I studied astronomy. We were talking about astronomy a little bit earlier. That was my scientific launching pad into this type of learning.
Okay.
So talking about the wise men, they were the magi. They were magicians.
They were magicians. They were into enchantment, and they were into divination. And if you really studied, and they probably worked for the king, and they were probably very scholarly like you. They were very smart people. They were not like the shepherds. They were not simple people. They were really educated people looking for answers. So it just goes to show that, you know, people can find answers, not necessarily in textbooks, but in nature, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. You find it in nature, and nature is up in the stars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go to the origin of consciousness. Like, an imagination experiment here.
Okay.
Like, bring yourself back 1 billion years to, or however long it was. I can't remember exactly how long it was.
Okay.
3 billion years, I think.
All right.
You think of this poor little slime sitting on a rock, and the sun goes over, and then darkness. Mm-hmm. And the sun goes over, and then darkness. Like, how many billions or thousands or millions of years did it take before that little piece of slime or whatever the hell it was, excuse my language.
Oh, this is public television. You can say what you like.
How many millions of years did it take for that creature to realize, oh my God, there's a difference in 12 hours versus this 12 hours? Mm-hmm. I mean, the earliest life forms, they didn't have these eyeballs that we have. That took many, many years. So there's a saying that says, phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny.
What does that mean?
Or, I'm sorry, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Okay. So the development of our human body summarizes the development of all of life throughout history. Mm-hmm. So when we're first conceived of, we're a single cell organism.
Right.
You've got a sperm and an egg come together, and then you're a single cell organism. Mm-hmm. You divide until the fetus looks like a tadpole.
Yeah, right, I've seen. Yeah.
And then it looks like a lizard, and then it looks like a baby ape, and then it looks like a more formed ape, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So if that type of summarization or kind of review of evolution is happening, that's also happening in our consciousness too.
Well, I would have to argue that most people today are so busy. You know, they go to work 9 to 5 if they're a working class. You know, they're feeding the kids, they're putting them to bed, they're going to work. You know, they live for the weekends. Where does the average person have the time to think about this or to ponder this? And do they? You know, do you think consciousness has gotten more popular? Are people looking for answers in the stars or the books? Or are people just getting things done and that's it, you know?
I think there's a bifurcation of the species happening right now.
You do?
I mean, there has to be.
Okay.
There's people who are gravitating towards technology and improving yourself through technology, getting better eyesight, and improving your body through implants.
Right.
Like we've all seen that in the movies, and it's coming. I mean, you go online, you can see all these videos of these technology companies making all of these types of things. And then you have the people who are going more towards the mystical, towards the magical, towards irrational, which is a part of being human. Mm-hmm. Part of being human is irrational, and part of it is magical and mystical and unexplainable.
Well, you know, I just stop and think, and I've had this thought for many years. If you just, like I live in Litchfield, I can go outside in my backyard and I can look up at the stars and I can ponder and I think to myself, you know, my parents saw that Great Dipper, or they saw those stars, and my ancestors saw those stars. And it just kind of pulls me into the mystery. And often what I think to myself is, if the universe goes on forever, and it just doesn't stop, I can't comprehend that. And if the universe stops and is limited, I can't comprehend that as well. So I look at this and say to myself, this is a mystery. Like, yeah, you have to go to work, you have to do certain things. We're here tonight filming. Everybody has responsibilities. But when you go outside and you really think about the seasons and the sun and the stars and the universe, you have to conclude that we don't get it. Like, at least I don't get it. You know, it's a mystery. Like, I can't explain it.
Yeah, it is a mystery, and we don't get it. I mean, we became, it's January 8th, we just came very close to starting World War III, the beginning of World War III, so we clearly don't get it.
Right.
None of us.
Right.
We can't blame any one person for it.
Sure.
We're all part of it. We're all part of it.
Right, right. So you're doing this lecture in February. What's the date?
It's February 20th, 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
Wow.
It's amazing. I remember like 20 years ago, everybody was talking about Y2K and the computer stopping, and you know, here we are 20 years later. So what are you going to be talking about, and where are you going to be doing this?
It will be at the, it's for the Astrological Society of Connecticut.
Oh, good.
It's at the Keeney Memorial Center in Wethersfield, Connecticut.
Okay.
It's right in beautiful, historic Wethersfield, really beautiful part of the town, on February 20th, and I'll be talking about astrology and the Hermetic traditions.
Okay. So if folks want to find out about it, or they want to do some research, or maybe they want to reach out to you, or is there a website? Do they call that organization? How do they find out more about it?
It's asc.org.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, myasc.org,
okay.
myasc.org.
Okay.
That's the Astrological Society of Connecticut.
Okay.
And there's my website, which is iwanickimedia.com.
You got to spell your last name.
Yeah. IWANICKI media.com.
Okay.
And you can find me on the internet, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff.
So what would you say to somebody, they're starting the new year, it's 2020. You know, I read that 98% of the people that make New Year's resolutions, they fail. Only like 2% actually follow through. What would you say to someone in the bleak of winter, because we're in winter right now, and they want to change their life, they want to be more in sync with the nature, with, you know, society. What would your advice be? Would you tell them to make New Year's resolutions? Would you tell them to sit and contemplate? What would you say to them?
Well, first thing I would say is cut out any terrible habits, cut out any drinking, any sugar, any vices that are unessential to consciousness, because these are substances which, if now were brought into the market, would be under the regulation of the FDA.
They would be. Wow.
Yeah, caffeine is a stimulant.
Right.
And it's not only is a stimulant, it's a hallucinogenic. Some people even call it.
Really?
Sure.
Wow.
I mean, it gets you pretty wired.
Right.
And sugar is it's just another form of alcohol. Alcohol and sugar are sister compounds or brother compounds, whatever you want to say. They're both metabolized in the liver, and they both do a number on your body. So.
Wow.
First thing you do is get rid of those type of things to get in tune with the energies around you.
Drink more water.
Drink more water, drink more vegetable, or drink.
Well, you know, people
eat more vegetables.
Yeah, but they do drink it too. You can do a green drink, and you know, so getting back to nature, getting rid of the substances, not necessarily, you know, people think of alcohol or they think of tobacco, which are, but you're talking about sugar, which is a big thing.
I mean, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere, so it's hard to eliminate it.
It's actually in ketchup, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So it's everywhere, and I'm not into conspiracies, but what I wonder is, with all that's going on with the technology, what's going on with our society, how we're separating nature from people, it's almost like people are depressed and they're turning to alcoholism, they're turning to cigarettes, they're turning to sugar, they're turning to caffeine, and they're not living a life fully because they're not tied to nature. Yeah. You know, so it's a big problem indeed. So what's that date again in February?
February 20th at the Keeney Memorial Center in Wethersfield, Connecticut.
Excellent. Mark, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you being on the show, and I want to have you back and talk more about Hermetic philosophy. Well, we hope we gave you something to think about. Mind yourself until next time. It's Greg Dwyer saying, make it a nice night. Thank you so much.